It is an important moment in which we should take stock of where we go from here, to look at how our leaders, especially the new ones, will handle and talk about the gun violence epidemic in America. The White House today calling on the brand new Speaker of the House, his name is Mike Johnson, to work with President Joe Biden to get something, anything done to protect Americans.
The House has a new Speaker who he said he's ready to get to work and to find common ground. Now is the time. Now is the time to find common ground. Let's work together to ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Let's work together to enact universal background checks, require safe storage of guns, and keep guns out of the hands of criminals and dangerous individuals who have no business being armed with a weapon of war.
For his part, Speaker Johnson, who has offered thoughts and prayers to the victims, has voted against all of those gun safety measures listed there by Karine Jean-Pierre and others in the past. He has a 92% approval rating from the NRA. That's according to the group VoteSmart. And he has previously blamed school shootings on abortion and the teaching of evolution. Comments not to be believed, really, from a man who is right now 2 heartbeats away from the presidency. And when it comes to other national issues, here's where the new Speaker Johnson stands. He supports a national abortion ban. Last year, he introduced a nationwide version of a Don't Say Gay bill. And he has spoken out in support of banning marriage equality. Johnson was also a key architect in the attempted coup to keep Donald Trump in power after he lost the 2020 election. The brand new Republican Speaker of the House was the one who led that legal front, the amicus brief supporting the Texas lawsuit that sought to invalidate the presidential election results in 4 swing states that President Joe Biden won. Republican Speaker Johnson's win in the Republican circus of the last 3 weeks makes clear that there is no longer any question to be asked about where the Republican Party stands on questions central to American democracy. Take it from the lips of Matt Gaetz, the man who started all this latest Republican congressional upheaval weeks ago when he started the move and voted to oust McCarthy.
And the swamp is on the run. MAGA is ascendant. And if you don't think that moving from Kevin McCarthy to MAGA Mike Johnson shows the ascendance of this movement and where the power in the Republican Party truly lies, then you're not paying attention.
That is where we start the hour with some of our most favorite reporters and friends. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale is back with us. Also joining us, former Congressman from Florida, MSNBC political analyst David Jelly is here. And our friend, the former Democratic Congresswoman, MSNBC political analyst Donna Edwards is with us. So, Ali Vitale, I heard that Gaetz clip. And if you say MAGA Mike, it sounds like Magic Mike, which is a movie I never saw but have heard of. This is his moniker. And this is why he won. And this is repellent to swing state voters who will be critical to growing the majority or even keeping it. What do Republicans have to say about what is a political mess?
First of all, please don't ruin Magic Mike for me. I quite love Channing Tatum in that movie. I don't want to conflate these two things. Please leave Channing Tatum and Mike Johnson completely separate. Done. But now that we've gotten that out of the way, I do think that Republicans went through the last 3+ weeks of chaos, and it was chaotic, and all of them said it, and now there are attack ads where Republicans can, in their own words, describe their majority as chaotic and dysfunctional. That exists. But I also think that they may have landed in a place that was both more true to the ethos of the House Republican Conference than McCarthy was as a leader, but also someone in Mike Johnson who has more politically problematic baggage than McCarthy ever did. And here's why I mean that. You know that I'm someone who really believes that abortion is such a landscape-changing issue. We saw it in 2022. It's still being tested in real time. The post-Roe landscape is still very much unfolding in real time before us, and we don't know what the electoral implications of that are going to be. But when you look at someone like Speaker Johnson, he allows that to be tested in real time, because whoever the speaker is becomes a national figure for this party. The fact that he is someone who pushed for a national ban is something that already I've been asking Republican women about. People like South Carolina's Nancy Mace, who's from that swingy Charleston area, Nicole Malliotakis out of New York. Both of them have said that they have discomfort, especially Mace, with the party's positions on abortion. Mace even yesterday reiterated to me that this party, her party, has a problem with the way it talks about women and reproductive care and bodily autonomy. Yes, that is a problem that we have seen play out at the polls in the small groupings of ballot box moments that we have had so far with this issue. But Mace also defended her vote for Johnson, and Malliotakis did the same by saying that they're not going to agree with every speaker on every issue. And this is where it becomes a problem, not just on abortion, but on LGBTQ+ issues, on mass shootings. I think when Karine Jean-Pierre earlier today said, it's the time to come together on points of commonality. I also think the question that we should probably be asking ourselves in the halls of Congress is, what if there are no points of commonality, to explain the fact that we have seen further inaction after more mass shootings since last year when they did legislation on this issue? I think that's just one of the political realities here when you talk about all of these different cultural issues and you relate them back to the Speaker's office. There's a lot we're still unpacking in real time.
Okay, we're going to do all of that because yours truly has 2 hours to work with. So I made a list. We're going to do abortion. We're going to do shooting. We're going to do marriage equality. Let's start with abortion, since you brought us there. So a lot of the bans eliminate exceptions in the case of rape and incest. That is opposed by 87% of all Americans. A lot of the bans also make impossible exceptions for life of the mother. That has the opposition of 93% of all Americans. Here is the new Republican Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, at a House Judiciary Committee, sharing a little bit of his views on abortion.
Roe v. Wade gave constitutional cover to the elective killing of unborn children in America. Period. Think about it. Let it settle on you. As a result, the lives of more than 63 million American children have been lost. You think about the implications of that on the economy. We're all struggling here to cover the bases of Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and all the rest. If we had all those able-bodied workers in the economy, we wouldn't be going upside down and toppling over like this.
A woman's right to make choices about her own body, or an unviable pregnancy, or her own health or life, or in the case of rape and incest, reduced to, quote, from the Republican Speaker, able-bodied workers in the economy. Wow. Had anyone seen that?
That's actually even just from last year. So I know that as opposition research, and you and everyone else on this panel knows how this works, people dig into the archives, and certainly that has been happening in regards to now Speaker Johnson's past statements from the time that he was in the Louisiana legislature, from his time as a lawyer for a conservative religious freedom group. All of that is out there. But this is not Oppo in the sense that they had to dig for it. This is from, what did your upper left just say, May of 2022? This is the current iteration of the Judiciary Committee on which he serves. And I think it's instructive to look at the committees that Johnson himself serves on. It's not just Judiciary, where under Jim Jordan, they have been one of the leaders in leading the charge on investigations of the Biden administration and related allies and family members. But then also the fact that Johnson serves on the Select Committee on so-called weaponization of government. It's a red meat committee. We haven't heard too much about it, but it's a reminder that this is a guy that serves at the very center of a lot of these Republican red meat issues and moments that they're attempting to push it out of this building.
I mean, David Jolly, the truth structurally of this circus that you and Allie have covered for the whole network for the last 3 weeks is that the structural impediment to winning the votes of Gaetz and all of his ilk meant that the electoral baggage that the eventual speaker would have would be exactly what it is. But that said, we're not going to look away. Here is Republican Speaker Mike Johnson in 2016 in Shreveport, Louisiana.
People say, how can a young person go into their schoolhouse and open fire on their classmates? Because we've taught a whole generation, a couple of generations now of Americans, that there is no right and wrong. that it's about survival of the fittest and you evolve from the primordial slime. Why is that life of any sacred value? Because there's nobody sacred to whom it's owed. None of this should surprise us.
This is who they are, I guess.
Yeah. I would suggest it might also be because we have gun laws that allow a 16-year-old access to a firearm. But Mike Johnson and I see the world in that issue very differently. I think this conversation you're having with Allie is a very important one, because I think in the rush of the palace intrigue, it's, oh no, is Mike Johnson worse or better than Kevin McCarthy? What if it was this person or this person? I don't see Mike Johnson's ascending to the speakership as a change in direction at all. I think it's just one foot in front of the other for the Republican conference, and it is a reminder, and I think this is the importance of the conversation you and Allie are having. It's a reminder to the nation of where the Republican Party is today on critical issues of importance to them, be it guns, be it reproductive rights, be it immigration, be it voting rights, be it the willingness to steal a free and fair election from Joe Biden. Mike Johnson is a reminder to the nation of that. And I do think the other issue that comes into play with Mike Johnson is his public living of his religious beliefs in the political arena. And I know this is a tricky issue, but I would say even among conservative Republicans, many believe that the way you empower a church is to actually use government to secure freedom for all people. And that allows faith-based institutions to thrive and change hearts and minds at the altar, not within the Capitol. And Mike Johnson's willingness and interest in using government to legislate religious tenets and morality, it's into a really tricky space that then just really accelerates how out of step they are with Main Street America on critical issues of personal liberty.